The moment the letter surfaced, everything changed, because this was not a public statement, not a press release, not a diplomatic clarification, but a private communication never meant to be seen, never meant to be heard, never meant to exist outside a locked channel of power, and yet somehow, against every rule of silence that governs the world's most controlled elite circles, the words allegedly written by one of Dubai's most powerful figures to Meghan Markle were suddenly whispered into the global bloodstream, and the implications were immediate, explosive, and deeply unsettling. Because this was not just about a denied entry, not just about an airport interaction that lasted minutes but reshaped perceptions for years. This was about intention, about judgment, about a decision made long before her passport ever touched the scanner, long before the aircraft wheels ever kissed the Dubai runway. And according to accounts that first emerged from within administrative corridors, the denial itself had been procedural, quiet, and absolute, unfolding behind glass at Dubai International Airport Terminal 3 on February 16, 2026, where witnesses described a pause at immigration, an unusual delay, a flicker of system recognition, followed by a silent directive that redirected Meghan Markle away from the public queue and into a private processing area, where no explanation was given and no negotiation was allowed, and within less than 40 minutes, the determination had already been finalized, entry declined outright, not postponed, not deferred, but denied completely, without statement, without spectacle, without confrontation, and within hours, she was gone. Her presence erased not through force, but through procedure, a moment that left observers questioning what had happened behind closed doors long before she arrived. The camera captures the sterile stillness of the immigration corridor, a controlled environment where nothing appears emotional and everything appears predetermined, the kind of place where decisions are not debated but executed. And it is here, insiders later whispered, that the letter's shadow first began to exist, because according to sources who claimed proximity to the chain of authority, the communication itself had been issued days before her flight even departed, not as a reaction but as a preventative measure, a message written not in anger but in calculation, a document that allegedly outlined concerns not about identity but about volatility, not about status but about predictability. And those familiar with Dubai's internal protocols understood instantly what that meant, because in a system designed around stability and narrative control, unpredictability is not just inconvenient, it is disqualifying. And this is where the story stops being procedural and starts becoming personal, because the alleged contents of the letter were not theatrical, not dramatic in tone, but devastating in implication, describing a need to preserve institutional neutrality, to avoid media entanglement, to protect strategic relationships from reputational turbulence. And according to one insider who spoke under strict anonymity, the message contained a line so cold, so deliberate, that those who saw it never forgot it. A line that reportedly emphasized that Dubai does not respond to narratives, it responds to risk assessments. And in that single sentence, observers realized this was never about Meghan Markle the person, but Meghan Markle the variable, the unpredictability that follows her presence, the gravitational pull of controversy that transforms every appearance into a headline, every silence into speculation, every movement into interpretation. Security footage shows a brief silhouette exiting the private processing corridor, a figure composed but visibly tense, moving without escort but without destination, the body language controlled but unmistakably altered, the posture of someone who understands instantly that something irreversible has occurred. And insiders later claimed that this was the moment she realized the decision was not spontaneous. It was pre-written, pre-approved, and possibly communicated long before her arrival, long before her team finalized the itinerary, long before the plane ever began its descent. Because what makes this alleged letter so explosive is not its existence, but its timing. And according to those tracking the timeline, its creation reportedly coincided with a surge of renewed scrutiny into Meghan Markle's past, scrutiny that had been intensifying quietly through investigative podcasts, resurfaced personal connections, and institutional reviews that question disclosure accuracy and narrative consistency, creating an environment where global partners, media executives, and government officials were no longer evaluating her as a personality, but as a risk profile. A shift subtle but profound, invisible to the public but deeply consequential behind closed doors. And Dubai, unlike Western institutions that often allow controversy to unfold publicly, operates on a a doctrine of silent prevention, removing variables before they become disruptions, neutralizing uncertainty before it becomes spectacle. And those familiar with the system understood that when Dubai closes a door, it rarely announces the closure, it simply ensures the door never opens again. A close shot of passport scanners blinking in quiet repetition, each scan a decision point, each beep a confirmation of access or denial, and insiders later described that Meghan Markle's passport had triggered not an alarm, but a recognition, a pre-existing administrative determination that had already been logged, already been authorized, already been finalized, meaning the outcome was never in question, only its execution was. And yet, the letter itself did not emerge immediately, it remained hidden, buried beneath layers of discretion and protocol until whispers began circulating among diplomatic intermediaries and commercial partners. Whispers that described not confrontation, but communication, not rejection, but clarification. A message that allegedly emphasized distance, not hostility, but separation. The kind of separation that does not provoke retaliation, but ensures detachment. And when fragments of its alleged language began appearing in private briefings and insider discussions, the reaction was immediate because this was not merely an immigration decision, it was a signal, a message that reverberated far beyond the airport terminal, reaching boardrooms, media offices, and royal circles that suddenly understood the implications without needing explanation. Because in environments governed by power, silence is not absence, silence is instruction. And as this alleged letter's existence continued to circulate, one question began to eclipse all others. Not whether Meghan Markle had been denied entry, that part was already procedural fact, but why the communication had been written at all, why a private message had been necessary to formalize. What could have remained an invisible administrative action, and insiders suggested the answer was chillingly simple, because this was not about the moment, it was about the future, about establishing a boundary so clear, so deliberate that it would not need to be repeated. And those who understood the system knew exactly what that meant, because in environments like Dubai, the most powerful statements are never spoken publicly, they are written privately, delivered quietly, and enforced absolutely. What happened next did not unfold in public view, it unfolded in whispers, in sudden silences, in meetings that were never announced, and calls that were never acknowledged, because the alleged letter did something far more devastating than a public rejection ever could. It altered perception at the highest levels of influence, and those who had once seen Meghan Markle as an untouchable global figure suddenly began to see something else entirely, a liability that could no longer be managed through charm, visibility, or narrative control. And insiders would later claim that within 48 hours of the letter's rumored circulation, a quiet but unmistakable recalibration began across multiple sectors. Commercial partners who had previously pursued her with urgency suddenly paused negotiations. Media executives who had once fought for association began requesting additional due diligence, and diplomatic intermediaries who had once facilitated access began maintaining distance, not publicly, not dramatically, but definitively, because the alleged message contained something more powerful than rejection. It contained finality, a clarity that required no follow-up and offered no pathway for reversal. The frame opens on a dimly lit executive conference room where nothing is spoken aloud but everything is understood, a place where reputations are evaluated not by emotion but by risk exposure. And insiders described how Meghan Markle's name, once associated with opportunity, suddenly became associated with uncertainty, not because of anything she said or did in that moment, but because of what the letter implied about how she was now being perceived by one of the world's most strategically controlled power centers. And those present in these private conversations understood instantly that this was not an isolated incident, it was a signal that would influence decisions far beyond Dubai itself. Because in global power networks, letters like this do not exist in isolation, they ripple outward, interpreted, analyzed, and internalized by institutions that operate according to the same underlying principle, predictability above all else, and according to individuals familiar with high-level decision protocols. Once a figure becomes categorized as unpredictable, the consequences unfold quietly but relentlessly. Invitations stop arriving, opportunities stop accelerating, partnerships stop advancing, not through confrontation, but through absence, through omission, through the slow end. Deliberate withdrawal of access that leaves no visible wound but ensures irreversible separation, and this is precisely what insiders began noticing in the days that followed. Scheduled meetings postponed indefinitely, exploratory projects moved into indefinite review, communication channels that had once been immediate suddenly becoming delayed, vague, or entirely unresponsive. A silent silent shot of luxury aircraft departing into empty sky, symbolizing movement without destination, access without arrival, and observers later described how this moment captured the psychological shift that had occurred, because Meghan Markle's influence had always depended on forward momentum, on constant expansion, on perpetual narrative advancement, and the alleged letter represented the opposite: containment, restriction, and strategic stillness. The kind of stillness that does not destroy visibility but renders it ineffective, visible but disconnected, present but excluded. And what made the situation even more unsettling was the response from Meghan Markle's camp, which was described by insiders as unusually restrained, because rather than issuing immediate denials or launching public counterattacks, there was silence. A silence that many interpreted not as weakness, but as calculation and understanding that confronting the existence of the letter would only amplify its significance. And those familiar with crisis containment strategies recognized the dilemma instantly, because acknowledging the letter risked validating its authority while ignoring. It risked allowing its implications to solidify uncontested, and this created a strategic paralysis that left observers watching for any sign of reaction, any signal of resistance, any indication that the alleged message would be challenged or dismissed, but none came. The camera focuses on a mobile phone screen displaying unanswered calls, unread messages, and communication attempts suspended in uncertainty, a visual representation of how power operates in its most subtle form, not through confrontation, but through withdrawal, through the quiet redefinition of access that transforms influence into isolation without ever announcing the transition publicly. Because the truth is, letters like this are not designed to provoke response, they are designed to establish boundaries. Boundaries that do not need to be enforced repeatedly because their existence alone is sufficient. And according to insiders who claim to have seen fragments of the alleged communication, its tone was neither hostile nor emotional, but procedural, detached, and unmistakably final, emphasizing institutional priorities rather than personal judgment, framing the decision not as rejection but as necessity. And in doing so, it achieved something far more powerful than confrontation ever could. It removed the possibility of negotiation entirely, replacing uncertainty with certainty, speculation with structure, and visibility with exclusion. A slow pan across the Dubai skyline at night, illuminated but distant, accessible yet unreachable, symbolizing the paradox of modern influence, where visibility does not guarantee access and prominence does not guarantee acceptance. And insiders later described how this moment captured the essence of what the alleged letter represented: not an emotional reaction but a systemic decision, one rooted not in conflict but in calculation, not in anger but in preservation. And as the alleged letter's existence continued to circulate quietly through elite circles, its impact extended beyond Meghan Markle herself, becoming a case study in how quickly perception can shift, how rapidly access can contract, and how decisively institutions can redefine their relationships with individuals they once embraced. And observers noted that the most significant aspect of the entire situation was not the denial at the airport, not the rumors that followed, but the letter itself, because it transformed a moment into a message, an event into a signal, and a denial into a declaration, one that did not need to be repeated to be understood. And those who recognized its implications understood something even more unsettling, because in environments governed by silent authority, the most powerful words are not the ones spoken publicly, but the ones written privately, delivered quietly, and enforced without resistance, leaving behind no spectacle, no confrontation, no explanation, only the unmistakable reality that the decision has already been made, and nothing, absolutely nothing, will reverse it.